It's time to talk about the important issues for the natural state, and there's only one place to turn for that. Opportunity Arkansas's Nic Horton. You can find Nic's work at opportunityarkansas.org.
Yeah, good Wednesday morning to you. Welcome back to First News here on the 8th of January. And yes, now joining us to talk on the state of affairs, politically speaking, here in Arkansas, is Nic Horton, the CEO and founder of Opportunity Arkansas. Nic, welcome back to the show. Happy New Year. How you doing this morning?
Hey, it's great to be back. I haven't talked to you all year, I feel like.
I know it.
So
it's been a long time.
It's great to be here. It's good to hear your voice, so thanks for having me.
We always appreciate you getting up early and jumping on with us. And so, Nic, I was perusing the Opportunity Arkansas newsletter the other day that landed in my inbox. It's called Non-Debatable, for those who haven't seen this before. And we'll get into the content here in just a minute. But Nic, this is very informative and laid out for a very easy read about what's happening in our state's political arena. And so how can people get signed up to get this newsletter? Because it's a great piece of work by your organization, and of course people are going to want to be updated on what's going on with this legislative session that starts on January 13th.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate it. I mean, this is a product and a function, a deliverable of our organization that we're super proud of. I mean, this was something that 2 years ago about this time, someone on our team on a Friday afternoon said, you know what we should do? We should have a newsletter. Like, we should just put this information directly in people's inboxes about what's happening at the state capitol going into legislative session. I think it was the Friday before session started.
Right.
And so a bunch of us scrambled that weekend, came up with a name, came up with a logo. I found in my many years of doing branding and marketing and research and some of this, sometimes your best ideas kind of happen that way. It just happens almost overnight all of a sudden, and you scramble and you make it happen, and then You're like, oh man, that was cool. That worked out. And so that was kind of the story of Non-Debatable. We just felt like there was this missing piece where there wasn't anything like this in the state of Arkansas, where folks could once a week, we're not going to spam you. We're not going to send you an email every 20 minutes or every day, but particularly during legislative session. Yes, exactly. I feel that, brother. But once a week at minimum during legislative session, sometimes more often if there's major breaking news, we're going to give you an update. And our philosophy, our focus is not to break news or just to tell you the news of the day. KARN, y'all do a great job of that. There's other media outlets that tell you what the news is. We want to tell you what the news means.
Right.
We want to tell you, here's what's happening at the state capitol. And yeah, you may have not heard of it yet, but we want to be sure you know what it is and what it means for you and your family. And so we're really excited about this. We started it in 2023, as I said, before the session, and it was a massive success. We broke all sorts of industry records for open rates and subscriptions, and we're just really excited to continue this going into 2025. Non-debatable.com is the easiest way for folks to sign up. Non-debatable.com. It's a big word, but it's all one word. Just sound it out if you need to. Non-debatable.com, or you can also find it on our website, opportunityarkansas.org, or any of our social feeds. Totally free of charge. And like I said, we're not going to blow you up. We're not going to spam you all the time with information, but we spend hours and hours. Our team across the board spends a lot of time doing research and analysis and editing and making sure that this thing is really tight and digestible for folks. So it's a great product. I mean, we're super proud of it, and I think it's hope that it's a very valuable service to the people of Arkansas, and hope they'll sign up if they haven't already.
Well, and these things do always happen on a Friday afternoon, so you get to do them. You get to work on it over the weekend, and so that makes a lot of sense. One of the things you guys researched apparently and put into this latest issue of Non-Debatable, you referenced Cotham's corn fritters in the newsletter. I have to admit, I have not had the Cotham corn fritters before.
Oh my goodness!
Is this something that I've been missing out on in this state?
You've been definitely missing out. So one of my favorite little eating holes right next to the state capitol, Cotham's in the city, or Cotham's as some people call it.
Okay, I wasn't sure if it was Cotham's or Cotham's. Yep. I wasn't sure.
The real ones call it Cotham's, but Cotham's we'll let it slide. So the Cotham's corn fritters. I mean, basically anything fried that you can imagine, they've got it at Cotham's. And yeah, the corn fritters are kind of a go-to staple. They've got amazing fried okra as well, and it's just right down the hill from the state capitol. One of my favorite dining spots in the whole state. And yeah, they're a big staple. So next time we're grabbing lunch, we're gonna have to go there, and I'm gonna have to show you the ropes.
Yes, no, I definitely can appreciate that. So so that was the first thing that I pulled out of the newsletter that came out the other day. But
first and maybe most important. I mean,
right.
They're pretty dang good. I'm not gonna lie.
As far as the upcoming legislative session, the newsletter really lays out what some of the priorities will be for our state, and it goes from tax cuts to welfare reform. It also referenced more attacks on educational freedom. And now you and I have talked a lot about the welfare reform and the tax cuts, but what are these new attacks on educational freedom? Can you give us some insight on what part of the priorities will show up with this in the next session?
Well, we've already seen legislation filed by some of the very, very extreme liberal Democrats, like Representative Andrew Collins, who represents a large part of Arkansas, or Little Rock, I should say, on the Hillcrest Heights area. He's filed legislation already to repeal and end the education freedom program entirely. And that, I think, has very little chance, frankly, of going anywhere. I don't suspect it'll get anywhere close to getting out of House Education Committee, but it's an indication of things to come, I think. And so one of the things we unpacked in this week's non-debatable, as you mentioned, is this new line of attack, this new narrative. And if you remember, Toby, we covered a lot of this back in the summer. We talked about it here on the show as well. Right. This idea from the Arkansas Teachers Union that, okay, well, we're going to pivot, we're going to shift, because there's so many people. There's nearly 15,000 families now that are participating in the Education Freedom Program. I fully expect that number could double or triple by this time next year when the program is universal. The teachers union and the folks, the defenders of the status quo, as we like to call them, are terrified about that. And so, but the reality is that you've got tens of thousands of families now that are benefiting from this program, that love this program, and we're telling their stories every day at opportunityarkansas.org about how much this program is literally changing the lives of Arkansans all over the state for the better. And I think something has clicked. I think there's been a light bulb moment from the other side that they've realized, okay, this is a very popular program that has been championed and is continuing to be championed by a very popular conservative governor, and we can't just keep running into the buzzsaw and telling everyone it's bad, it's bad, it's bad. And so now they're softening their messaging, and they're pivoting to this. And they even said this. We mentioned this in the newsletter. They've said this now in a televised debate that we had with them.
Right.
We're not against vouchers. We've never been against that. We're not against that. We just want it to be accountable. We just want it to be fair. We just want there to be standards and, all of these wonderful, fluffy things that just sound wonderful that government, by the way, is incapable of accomplishing for anything, much less for private schools that were never intended to be held to these standards that were created for public schools explicitly. And so we raised the flag, kind of raised the alarm about that, and we're going to continue to do that because it sounds great, right? I mean, who's against accountability?
Yeah.
Who's against fairness? Who's against transparency? And the transparency piece is another one. I think, we could see very likely in the legislative session some legislation, I think, to require schools that take EFA funding to be subject to the Freedom of Information Act. We've seen them try to do that over the summer. The Attorney General stopped it, thank goodness, Attorney General Tim Griffin. But I think that could come back. I think you could see some legislation very realistically that tries to not end the EFA program directly, but to do this accountability play and say, well, we think it's great. We think it's fine. We're not opposed to it anymore, but we just want to make sure it's fair and accountable.
Yeah.
And so this idea of what they tried to do in the Education Rights Amendment to say, we're going to impose all of these impossible standards on you that you can't possibly comply with. And then when you can't possibly comply with it, the effect will be that it will end education freedom in Arkansas, but they're not going to frame it that way. They're not going to phrase it that way.
Right.
So folks aren't going to know, and legislators are going to be, they're going to try to trick them into voting for something like that in the legislative session. So the other kind of some things that I think are potentially on the horizon, and kudos to them, I suppose, in finally realizing that this is an extremely popular program that's benefiting our state. But we've got to be on guard because they're never going to stop. They're
Right.
never going to stop coming for this program.
Do you think that switching gears a little bit here, do you think the Arkansas Supreme Court is going to get dealt with a little bit? I mean, we've got Chief Justice Karen Baker taking over there and doing all sorts of weird stuff at this point, firings, appointments, et cetera. And so is that fallout from having judges listed as nonpartisan on our ballots? And do you think that our legislature will deal with that here in this next session?
I think there is a really good chance that we're going to see a push to do that. And you mentioned the Chief Justice, the new Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. We now have a majority conservative state Supreme Court for the first time in state history.
Right.
Here in the last couple of years, which we all should be really, really proud of. And it's a game changer in terms of creating a pathway and a confidence for the state legislature and the governor and policymakers to continue to do conservative things, because what we've seen at the state level and certainly at the federal level is great conservative changes happen, and then the left does what they always do. They weaponize the court system and the justice system to derail that progress. Mm-hmm. And so we've made tremendous progress there, and now we are going to have, to your point, a liberal, Democrat-leaning Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court, Karen Baker, who was elected in the most recent election, in an election where Donald Trump was on the same ballot, and he won the state of Arkansas by 2-1.
Right.
So explain to me, how that's possible when you have a conservative candidate for president that wins with 66, 67% of the vote, and a Democrat liberal Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. There's really only one explanation, and you're gonna be hearing more and seeing more from us about this going forward, certainly. Mm-hmm. But it's because, frankly, voters were not given the transparency that they deserved to know who they were voting for, who they were being asked to vote for. You had a very conservative, true, constructionist type justice in Rhonda Wood that was on the ballot as well. Voters didn't know. I mean, Rhonda Wood and Karen Baker, they might as well be named John Doe and James
right.
Smith. I mean, those are just two very common names. And when you have the presidential election and congressional elections and all of this other noise, I mean, I can't tell you dozens of people that reached out to me and said, I don't know who to vote for. Who are these judges? Who are these people? And it's a fair.
I think I asked you that.
I think you may have. I wasn't going to out you, brother, but since you said it, it's a transparency issue. It's a fairness issue for the people of Arkansas. I don't think any of us, I mean, even folks on the left, I don't think can dispute that if voters had known the ideological leanings of the judges that they were voting for in this past election, it would have been a significantly different outcome. Yeah. When you look at Karen Baker was listed first on the ballot, and there's been research and studies that have shown, look, the candidates that are listed first, that's good for
you got a better
8
better
points.
odds.
I mean, you're going to that's already in your favor. And I think, look, I mean, voters deserve to know. That's the bottom line. They deserve that transparency to know who they're voting for and what they're going to get.
Well, of course, we've got a lot more to dig through, and we'll continue doing that next Wednesday with you, Nick. But always appreciate you stopping by. Of course, you can see Nick's work online at opportunityarkansas.org is the website. Nick, always appreciate you joining us here on the show, and we'll do it again next week.
Hey, I can't wait. Nondebatable.com if folks want to sign up for the newsletter, nondebatable.com, totally free of charge. Promise we won't spam you, and you can unsubscribe at any time.
That's right.
But I think you'll really enjoy it.
No,
so,
it's
thanks,
a
brother.
great piece of work. All right, Nick, have a great day.